Hey everyone, welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros about their experiences during the early days to help you feel just a little less crazy. My guest today is Laura Roeder. Laura is the founder and CEO of MeetEdgar, a social media automation tool she launched in 2014 to help marketers share their best evergreen content. Today, we're going to chat about her journey from consulting to leading a team of 15 and lessons learned along the way. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I actually saw you speak at the Business of Software conference a handful of years ago.
Awesome.
It was a fantastic presentation. So really looking forward to digging into some of those thoughts and hearing some other things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah.
So could you, just for listeners who may not know, could you just tell us a little bit about MeetEdgar, what it is and who's your target customer?
Yeah, so MeetEdgar is a social media automation and scheduling tool. So our best customer is a small business owner, an entrepreneur who does a lot of content marketing. So basically you're creating content to promote your business and you want to use social media as a channel to distribute your content. What's unique about Edgar is that we automate that whole process for you. So for example, we can use your RSS feed to pull your content. We automatically pull status updates from your blog posts, so you don't have to write that part yourself. We automatically pull the images from, again, your blog post or whatever you send us. And then we can also automatically, if you want to, cycle through that content over and over again so that you are promoting your old stuff and not just what you wrote that week. And that's kind of one of the big problems we wanted to solve at MeetEdgar is content marketers getting in this vicious cycle of feeling like you have to create a brand new piece of content every time you want to say something on social media, where you have actually already written 100 articles or recorded 100 podcasts or whatever it is, and you need to be showing those to people as well.
Okay, you're speaking my language. I'm in this zone right now. So I'm gonna be taking a look a little bit deeper. I've checked it out before, and I think timing hasn't quite been right. But so prior to Edgar, and it's cool to call it Edgar. We're on a first name basis.
Except you really should call him. We like to call him Edgar instead of it.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes. All right. So you were running what you called LKR social media. Can you talk a little bit about what you were up to before?
Yeah. So MeetEdgar is my first software company. So before I started MeetEdgar, I was doing social media training. So info products for people out there who need info products, or you can call it online courses or training or whatever you want. But I was teaching small business owners how to do social media marketing. So same area, same topic. I just moved from teaching it in classes to creating software that does it for you.
Okay. And is it safe to assume then that the inspiration for MeetEdgar was born from running that business? Or?
Yes. So Edgar actually came very directly from a class that I was teaching. If you Google Social Brilliant, I think we're kind of changing the platform that it's on right now, actually. But if you Google Social Brilliant, I think you'll find it, or like email our support team if you can't. And you can still find that course. And so before Edgar was created, there was no good way to organize and repurpose your content. The major social media tools still don't do this, which kind of blows my mind. You know, if you use Buffer or Hootsuite, you don't have a good organized library of your content within that tool. You just kind of use the tool to I'm going to write something and I'm going to send it out to the networks. So I found that was really not the best use of my time as an entrepreneur promoting my own business on social media. I wanted to keep track of, all the status updates. I'd written about a blog posts again so I could keep sending them out and keep telling people about this great work that I had created. So I was teaching people a manual process to do this. People were paying for a class to learn this. They were actually using the process and getting great results from it. So I validated the idea in kind of an unusual way. Basically, I was teaching it as a class, and I figured, okay, well, if people are willing to pay for just learning the methodology and then they still have to do the whole thing themselves and they're actually doing it, I think they would probably pay to have software just do it for them.
Okay, that's great. I like the idea of, you found your validation through creating a course. You saw people paying for it. But at the same time, LKR social media was a 7-figure business in and of its own right when you switched over to Edgar. So why in the world would you shut down a services company doing that well to bet on a SaaS?
Yeah, so I thought we were going to do both. That was sort of the game plan, is that I thought, okay, well, these will be great complements to each other, right? We'll be selling products and doing courses, and then we can have the software. And I thought it would be sort of a lead-in thing. And basically what happened is Edgar just was really successful really quickly. So we're a bootstrapped company, and we hit $1 million in annual recurring revenue 11 months after launch within our first year. Thank you. Yeah, bonkers is a good word for it. Which I was not expecting that level of success. And so my training business had been very, very dependent on me. Like I said, you can still get Social Brilliant, but actually the latest version of the course, I didn't create. And it's something that we update every so often as we need to, but before I was actively teaching live classes and answering questions, and the branding was all around me as the instructor. And I really didn't love that model for a lot of reasons. My business was very dependent on me, and I really wanted to move away from that. So when Edgar started doing so well, I just saw, oh man, this is the software business model is really the type of business model that I would rather than having my income dependent on courses. So yeah, sometime in the first year of MeetEdgar, we decided to basically shutter the course business and go all in on software. And that was a good move.
What do you attribute Edgar's massive early success to? That is a massive outlier for a bootstrap company. You had not taken on money for a bootstrap company to get to that level of MRR that quickly.
So I do want to add in the nuance that, bootstrap can mean a lot of different things. In our case, I think the most accurate way to say it is we're a self-funded bootstrapped company. So I just want to throw that out there because I was not in a situation there's some bootstrappers who it's one person, they have 2 hours a day after work in the evening, and they are not putting in, any money aside from the hosting fees or whatever. That was not the situation that I was in. We had a small team, less than 5 people, very small, but a small team of people for LKR social media that could work on MeetEdgar. I put some amount of my own money in for initial things like advertising. So I just say that because it's easy to listen to stuff like this and compare yourself and think, well, how, I've been working for a while and I'm only at 1,000 a month MRR or whatever. Everyone's situation is so different. And so I want people to be, inspired by this if they are, but I want to make sure that no one's listening doing the my friend calls it comparison despair, where you're no, why can't I do that? So, but to answer your question, I think that some of the,
So you were using some, the success of LKR is funding the development and some marketing. How much were you spending on marketing? I'm curious.
So we actually spent more than we've ever spent in the days. We spent way more on Facebook ads in the first 6 months of the business. We had some months in the beginning where we were spending $30,000 to $40,000 on ads, which now that the business is much bigger, we spend under $10,000. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense because you don't have any organic reach when you start out, right? So now we can do a lot more SEO and content marketing and word of mouth. When you start, you can pay money to get exposure to people, you're only going to have so much word of mouth because you only have so many customers, and you can't make yourself place on Google right from day one.
Yeah, that makes sense. What were the biggest challenges? I mean, even though it started off as showing signs of life and became a great success in that first year, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in bringing Edgar to life?
I mean, there's always team stuff, people stuff. Not everyone we hired was the right fit, especially being a remote company. So we've always been fully remote. We've never had any kind of office. And now we only hire people that have worked remotely before. We just, we're in a position where we have a lot of good candidates applying, and we're like, remote is its own beast, and some people love it and thrive on it, and some people do not thrive on it at all. And we want to make sure that you know what you're in for. So, we had some people in the early days that just weren't a match for us or weren't a match for remote. There's some people have a fantasy that remote means you don't really have to work when actually you have to be, I think, much more focused and much more organized, because obviously it's all up to you. You're the person who's accountable for your time. So finding the right team. I mean, I had never run a software company before. So my husband, Chris, is a developer, and he built the initial version of the tool. He kind of built the initial version and then kind of helped us, hire out our development team, and then left the business. So I always have him as an advisor, but he's not like the co-founder relationship where we were doing it all together, which has been great for our marriage. not having 50-50 and everything.
Yeah.
But there just was such a steep learning curve for me, just in things like, okay, someone asked for this feature. How seriously do we take that? Does that mean that we should definitely build it? How do we figure that out? I just never done anything like that before.
You mentioned, I'm curious about how you, some more detail on how you validated or invalidated some of the earliest ideas of what would become Edgar. Were there other things that you tried that you determined through some research were invalid, or how was the process? What was the process like that you went through to say, okay, Edgar is where we are going to put our resources?
We didn't really have one. The course kind of provided the structure for what the software would do. And then aside from that, Edgar is a tool with a point of view. So some tools are just kind of flat resources, like use it as you will. What's that spreadsheet one that's really popular? Airtable. Yeah. So a tool like Airtable is like we've given you this place to play. You can do a million different things with it. A tool like Edgar, we have a workflow for social media that we know works really well, and we're going to help you accomplish that. So I think for us, it's always been, and I mean, obviously we take requests from our users and we're looking at how our users are really using the tool. But I think part of the reason that we didn't have a lot of validation and checking, do you like this? Yes, no. Do you like that? Yes, no, is we weren't kind of asking so much what people wanted. We're just like, okay, what is the problem that our market's having? And then here's our point of view on the best way to solve that problem.
And you knew that people were willing to buy what you weren't trying to create a brand new segment. You weren't trying to create an entirely different thing. You knew that people were willing to hand over money to get this done better because they were buying your course.
Exactly. And I love an established market. I mean, so many entrepreneurs are scared of entering a competitive market, but if you have competitors, then the research has already been done that someone, hopefully lots of people, are willing to pay for a solution. So if they're going to pay for the other guy, if you create something that's not terrible, a certain amount of people are probably going to be willing to pay for yours.
I would love to hear more of your thoughts on that, because you do hear that pretty often. A lot of times founders will think that that coming up with something brand new that no one has done before is an advantage, and that's not always true. So when as you are thinking about competition and entering a crowded competitive space, which you did with Edgar, when is competition a good signal that there is demand? And when is competition a signal that you're going to be drowned out by more established players if you don't have bukus of money to spend on marketing? How do you slice that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important question, especially as a bootstrapper, right? Because you're often going against heavily funded companies. But funding is not everything at all. And in the VC world, there's all this talk about winner take all. Is it a winner take all market? I don't know where this idea came from, because thinking of an example of something that is a winner take all market is incredibly difficult to do. Like, as I look around the room that I'm sitting in right now, I cannot find any object that there's only one brand that sells that object. Like I have few choices for utility companies or cable companies, but like I still have a few, Yeah. So this idea of like, oh, you don't want to compete with like Uber, right? So something like Uber is still not winner take all. Obviously, they're just really heavily funded, and they're also willing to expand everywhere at the same time. But something that was fascinating to me, so I used to live in Austin, Texas, and Uber got banned in Austin for like 2 years, for like a long time, well after Uber had already been very established. And local companies sprang up and filled the void that focused only on Austin. And I don't know how they're doing now. Uber's probably driven them out of business now, because Uber's willing to just, lose $40 on every ride if they have to, right? But they stuck around for a while and maybe still stick around. So it's less about like, is there competition available in your marketplace? Because there almost always is. And most things, like software, people often do just use one tool. If you're not software, I've got a bunch of cups. I just showed you the 2 microphones that I have in my office right now, right before we started this call. And even software, there's instances where people use more than one of the same tool. But like, even if they're only using one, they absolutely can switch. And so it's looking at like, what is that strategy of your competitors? Because if you're going up against a VC business that is Uber, which is the most just hyper aggressive business in the world, where their strategy is clearly just to crush everyone else, which they still haven't been able to do, right? Because Lyft is out there. So that's not the case most times. Usually, even if a business is funded with tens of millions of dollars, that's not enough where they're willing to just like lose tons of money on every customer. Or maybe you're looking in a different space. So at MeetEdgar, we've focused only on very small businesses. Most funded businesses go up market really quickly because they can be larger businesses serving enterprise clients. And we've definitely seen some of our competitors go in that direction.
How did you come to that decision to focus specifically on small businesses as your target customer?
So it's a combination of my background and my passion. So one, I just don't know how to do sales. I know how to do marketing. I've just like literally never done sales. I've always worked for myself. I've never been in an enterprise environment. I have no idea how they do things. I have no idea how they buy things. Like it's just not in my wheelhouse. I could hire people who know how to do it, but I certainly didn't know how when I was starting out. So that's part of it, is it's just not my world. And the other part is that it's just really hard for me to get excited about serving really, really huge clients. And that's just my personal preference. Like some people do get excited about huge clients because they're like, yeah, we could serve them and they have such a big impact and that's so cool. For me, I'm so passionate about entrepreneurs, about all the solopreneurs that we have as customers, because I feel like we really, our tool saves a lot of time. I'm like, man, if we can save a solopreneur 5 to 10 hours a week that they were spending on social media, that's a real difference to their life. And that is really motivating for me.
Yeah, definitely. I like that your personal motivation and your personal passion is pulled into the strategy of the company. You could certainly, go after some enterprise clients and pull in some, some high ticket things, I'm sure. But do you see that that passion and personal motivation for yourself kind of filters through the culture of your team?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, people that we hire definitely need to be passionate about serving this community as well. And they are. So we have a Slack channel where we just post like cool businesses that we come across in our customer base, and we just kind of like look through their websites and we're like, ooh, it's so like, she has a business doing dog grooming, like just for bulldogs. I didn't know that. Like, that's cool. Never heard of that before. There's so many interesting things that our customers do. And, some of our team has come from a background of huge companies and hated it. And, they want to work for a small company now. So we are a small company, right? They like working for us and they like serving this market as well.
Yeah. And so, and you mentioned that the team is fully remote. Do y'all have an annual get together, or how do you manage the team in that way?
Yeah, we meet in person once or twice a year. It's an interesting balance because a lot of people are looking for a remote job because they want the flexibility, they want the time with their family, and the hard thing about meeting up in person is it takes a lot of time away from your family, right? Because you have to be away overnight for an entire week. So we started to drift into meeting up more because we're like, okay, we'll have our 2 annual meetings, and then maybe we'll have some other meetings where people are just meeting up with their department, and people were like, hold on, like now you're asking me to be away from my kids overnight 4 times a year. This isn't what I signed up for. So it's always tricky because it is so great to have that in-person connection, but you also need to make sure that you're building a remote business to thrive on remote, and that you do get your best work done in remote mode.
Hey friends, this is a great time to pause and let you know that Bright and Early is brought to you by Transistor.fm. Transistor offers you professional podcast hosting and analytics. They host this very podcast that you're listening to right now. And my friends, I got to tell you, it could not be easier. I can tell you from personal experience. As you also probably know, podcasting is becoming one of the best ways to develop a closer relationship with your audience. And so if you're thinking about starting a podcast, trust me, look no further. Just visit transistor.fm, and if you decide to sign up, let them know that Brian sent you. So if you were bootstrapping a brand new company today, what are some lessons that you would take with you into day one?
So I am bootstrapping a brand new company today.
All right, let's hear about it.
Well, now next interview, maybe in a year, I can talk about it. It's very early, and I had another business that I started since MeetEdgar that was a total failure. I just recently recorded a Startups for the Rest of Us episode about that one, so we can link to that. People can check that out. So yes, I've done good, I've done bad. So hopefully now I'm, taking the good parts and learning from the bad parts. So yeah, I mean, a big thing that I'm focusing on this time is, it's going to sound silly and obvious, but just staying within my wheelhouse, like we talked about before. So the new business is something that can be easily bootstrapped. It's the same market that we serve for MeetEdgar. I can do all the marketing myself. I can connect with the community myself. That wasn't true for the business that we ended up shutting down very early, which was in the DevOps space. Maybe it was a tool that was needed, but I'm not the person to go to the DevOps meetups and speak that language. It's not my passion at all. So yeah, it's something that I really took for granted in my success in MeetEdgar. You talked about what made this so big so quickly. I genuinely, as I'm sure you can hear listening to this podcast, I have so much passion for our customers and making our businesses succeed. And, we haven't talked too much about the details of MeetEdgar, but I'm so confident in how successful MeetEdgar can make them with their social media. When I meet someone, I'm like, no, but you really, believe me, you really should. You just really should be using it. You'll be really happy that you did. And that, like, there's no substitute for that genuine passion and that genuine excitement for spreading the word about what you do. So I want to make sure that the next thing I do is not just like, okay, I found a problem, I found a way to solve it, let's put together some ads and sell it to people. It's like, no, I am excited to talk about this over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's great. So final question, and thanks again, Laura, so much for making some time for the show. Final question is, building your own business can be stressful, and I'm just curious if there are any practices that you have found personally helpful in managing stress that you would like to share.
So I am really good at not letting business stress affect me personally. I just always, I think a way I think about it is like that I know that I will be okay in the worst case scenario. And I think it's actually good to really think through the worst case scenario, because people have this sort of vague, fuzzy idea of like, oh, well, if I do this, like my company will go under. And then it's like, okay, well, what if your company goes under? It's like, I'll die. It's like, well, actually, you won't die, right? Maybe you'll get a job, which is probably what you did before you had the company. And that's not so bad. Maybe you'll even like get a crappy job for a while that you don't like. Lots of people do that every day. Like you'll be okay. So yeah, I just sort of try to keep the perspective that I am a very lucky person who gets to do something that I love. I really enjoy being an entrepreneur. I really enjoy running a company.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of being an entrepreneur is that you get to do it your own way, right? So if I find that I'm getting really stressed by work regularly, then something needs to change. Like there's plenty of jobs I could get to stress me out. The whole idea of creating my own job is not to have that stress in my life.
It's interesting. Yeah. Am I hearing some Stoic negative visualization in there? Are you reading Stoicism?
I actually don't know about that. It sounds like I would like it, though.
Okay. Laura, I have news for you. You could write books on Stoicism. Hey, listen, how can our listeners find and follow you online?
So you can find MeetEdgar at meetedgar.com, MEET, not MEAT, an Edgar made of meat. That would be creepy. Or MeetEdgar on all the social medias. You can find me by Googling Laura Roeder. I feel like if you spell my name wrong, you'll still find me. Or you can find me on Twitter at LKR.
Perfect. My guest today has been Laura Roeder. Laura, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, listeners, hope your week is going great. Settling in here with my kombucha this week. Super, super tasty. And hey, shout out to Austin, Texas. Didn't want to interrupt Laura in the middle of that interview, but my grandparents lived in Austin when I was growing up, and I got to visit that fine city every single summer and run around Zilker Park. And so if you're listening from Austin, howdy partner, and reach out and say hello. Be good to know you. I thought that right off the bat there, the conversation around, avoiding comparison despair, as her friend coined the term, so good just to keep in mind. It is quite an accomplishment for MeetEdgar to grow in that first year at the rate that it did. She was also very forthright that was not organic. There was definitely, a fair chunk of ad spend going into that business. However, and to note that, like Laura Elizabeth, they are now, as time has gone on, able to pull back on ad spend because organic traffic is increasing and that lower cost customer acquisition channel is kicking in. So interesting to hear both of them make that same observation and take that same approach. But at any rate, comparison despair is not anything that any of us ought to engage in. Easier said than done. obviously. I think it was also fascinating to hear her talk a little bit about, the the product validation, that they didn't have a formal process that they went through. It sounds like to generate the idea for Edgar, that they had proven, some demand and willingness to pay, willingness to buy the course that would eventually be productized in the form of Edgar. Do these things. If you are trying to generate traffic and leads and grow your business by posting content on social media, these are the steps that you ought to follow. Do these things and take lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. Put these things into practice, and this will help you solve that problem. As they noticed enough people handing over money to do that thing, will then automate that in the form of a product. Just a fascinating thing there. It's worth noting, creating a course is no small feat. Um, there's there's certainly an argument to make that creating a very minimal prototype of software might very well be less work than creating a decent course. That that certainly is true. And on that topic of ad spend, much easier to get your money's worth if you are targeting a very specific use case, very specific workflow, in the way that I'm sure that Laura and the team over there were able to do. You're much more likely to get your money's worth out of simple product management for remote teams of 5 or less than the product management tool you've been looking for. Let's see what else. The bit about competition I thought was really fantastic advice to reiterate. Do not be afraid of competition. Don't be obsessed with being first to market. The list of companies, successful companies, who were not the first one to come up with, they were not the first product of that idea on the market, that has gone on to be a perfectly sustainable, successful business. That's a long list, and there's just it. I don't know. I feel like you're less likely to hear it now than than in years past. The idea of, oh yeah, if somebody else is already doing that, or you share an idea with somebody. Somebody shares an idea with someone else, and you overhear, oh yeah, that's exactly like, fill in the blank. That's no reason to be dejected. And I think that, the distinction, or the question I think that early stage founders should ask themselves is not, am I first, but okay, is this a signal here that there's demand, and this is a proven market, and I can enter it with a distinct point of view for a particular segment of this larger market, versus, oh gosh, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to break through the noise here unless I have $50,000 a month to spend on marketing. Laura's thoughts and observations on kind of staying in your wheelhouse, so to speak, or being in an industry that aligns with your strengths, your background, your knowledge. I've been hearing people refer to this as market founder fit. That said, passion for a given market isn't enough, and it's important but not sufficient. What I mean by that is, just because you're extremely passionate about a problem or a niche market, that does not mean that there's a sustainable business there, or that it's an attractive market. So, for example, I've really gotten into fly fishing over the last several years, and I would really love it to be able to create a SaaS product around helping fly fishing guides find and book more gigs, or some sort of offering for fly shops to make it easier for them to book guided tours, guided trips. So, but the thing is I mean, in talking to some like dozen or so now guides and shops, like I hate to say it, but like a pattern that has just been very consistent is how like borderline anti-tech and kind of jaded a lot of the folks that I've spoken with seem to be. And so as much as it's just like a qualitative like feel, just like a vibe that I've gotten that, if advice that I give on a regular basis, through customer interviews, is you just gotta like get a feel, like follow the energy. Where is it going? And as much as I would love to put a bunch of time and energy into creating a solution for a market that I believe in and am passionate about, I wish that there were more. I wish more people went fly fishing and cared about natural waters, and enjoyed being outdoors. And I wish that there were more, people making their living off of providing that service to people. Boy, it sure feels like I'd be forcing it. It's the market just sure doesn't seem there. I could be wrong, and somebody could prove me wrong. But in this case, it's where like my sense is telling me, okay, in this instance, passion is not enough. The time may not be quite right. As always, I would love to hear what you all think. You can go to brightenearlypodcast.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. You'll get about one email to a week for every 2 weeks or so from me with thoughts similar to these closing thoughts. And I would love also if you'd introduce yourself on Twitter. I am B Ray. That's BRHEA as in Bowie, Ross, Houston, Eisenhower, and Austin. And if you're enjoying this show, it'd mean a whole lot if you could just scroll down right now, leave a 5-star rating or review. It helps other people to find the show. And until next time, I'm Brian Ray.